There are a lot of myths out there about worthiness, inadequacy, too muchness. There's a lot of ideas about how to tend to this tender place within us. And as a worthiness teacher, someone who has taught about worthiness and how to heal and tend to the worthiness wound for a decade now, I thought I would break down some of the more popular ideas and share with you how I understand it and how I think about these ideas in order for you to better discern how you want to relate these ideas and what ideas you want to incorporate and take in your life. Hello, Thaís Sky here. Welcome to Reclaim the Podcast. I'm so thrilled to have you here. It's Monday, August 29th, and I'm releasing this episode on Tuesday, August 30th. I have been really going back and forth about what I wanted to talk about this week. There's so many ways that I can break down the worthiness wound, and I can talk about it, and I've been talking about it so much over the past few years. I have so much content, so much information out in the world about the worthiness wound from the various series I've done on my podcast and the various conversations I've had on Instagram. I mean, if you want to learn more about the worthiness wound, you can check out all of the resources on my website, thaissky.com. Everything is there. There's so much to learn. And so I really struggled with what I wanted to offer in this episode. You know, last week I talked all about the ways in which we can navigate and think about our too muchness, one kind of side of the worthiness wound. And I wanted this episode to be the other side, how to navigate and hold the ways we feel inadequate. But when I was coming up with the content and writing down the material, I just wasn't inspired by it. And so I cleaned the slate and really thought about what I wanted to spend time talking to all of you today. And I decided I want to break down some worthiness myths. There are a lot of ideas out in the world about how to navigate the feelings of inadequacy, the feelings of too muchness, the worthiness wound. And as I am in worthiness season and as doors are open for Worthy Women Rise, I know that part of my kind of job, right? Part of the opportunity that I have is to dispel some of these myths. And I have been doing that on Reels, on Instagram. But I thought I would record a whole podcast episode on the common ideas that I see and where I agree and I don't agree with these ideas. Now, of course, I know that any quote that you find on Instagram or online will lack nuance. I mean, that's just the way it is. The platform is meant to be a way to capture people's attention very quickly. And so this is not a reflection on anybody who has said these things. I'm not attacking a single person. I know that if I were to be having a conversation with them, they would outline a more nuanced idea about their quote. However, I think it's worthwhile for us consumers to understand a little bit more about how to think about these things so that we're not finding ourselves really berating ourselves for not maybe embodying these ideas to the extent that we think we need to embody them. Okay, so I'm going to break down these myths. Now, if you're listening to this and you're digesting everything that I'm sharing, it's feeling really good, and you're like, yes, I agree, this is exactly how I understand worthiness as well, then maybe Worthy Women Rise may be a good fit for you. Worthy Women Rise is my year-long program for women who are ready and wanting the depth and commitment to go into their worthiness wound and tend to the ways in which we feel like we have to people please, we have to be perfect, we have to constantly compare ourselves to others, finding ways to nourish our internal lives through a group experience so that you can go on in the world and take up greater space, so you can be who you were born to be, so you can get out of your own way. Worthy Women Rise is where I pour my mastery into. It's not just about the content. It's not about just knowing about the worthiness wound. I offer that stuff for free everywhere you can find me, but rather Worthy Women Rise is about the embodied experience of worth. It's about taking all this information, and we have a lot of information. It's about taking all of that information and figuring out how it applies into the unique context of our lives. Worthy Women Rise is now officially, forevermore, a year-long experience, because I know it takes time for us to cultivate trust in each other, trust in ourselves, for us to go into the places that hurt. Together, we're going to go through weekly process calls. We're going to get together every week to meet you where you're at, to unpack how the worthiness wound appears in your life wherever you are. People come into this program as beginners. They've never done the healing work before. People come into this program as advanced. They've done this work for years. People come into this program having never been in therapy before. People come into this program having been in therapy for a long time. It really is meant to meet you where you're at in exactly the ways in which you're currently feeling inadequate, which means people who come into this program tend to feel like they're worried that they're not going to belong. They're worried that the group is going to move beyond them. They're worried that they're going to be invisible. They worry, right? All of these worries that we have about the worthiness wound, of course, you're going to come into this program with those exact worries. Unlike maybe other ways that people hold this space where they want you to come in with a new intention and to do things differently, I recognize that we're going to bring ourselves wherever we go. And that means wherever the worthiness wound is showing up in your life, it's going to show up in this program. And so the program was built specifically to support us exactly where you are, with the exact concerns that you have, in gently developing the capacity for you to cultivate the worth that is already within you. You can learn more by going to worthywomenrise.com. Spaces are being taken up. There is a very limited number of spots left because this is an intimate experience of worth. You won't get lost here because there's a small collective of us. It's a small group. And so there's going to be plenty of space for you to take up and for us to support you wherever you are. Okay, so you can learn more by going to worthywomenrise.com. Okay, let us break down some worthiness myths. I collected some of these from the internet. I've literally read some of these verbatim. Some of these I have synthesized into, I've read multiple types of these and I synthesized into one kind of quote. And some of these have already broken down in different episodes, but I wanted to collect them all here. So we're going to start going through them one by one. I may repeat myself many times, but I think sometimes repetition and hearing it over and over again can actually be tremendously useful. So let's get into some of these. Okay, one of the most popular ones that I've been seeing lately is this idea of, if I am too much, go find less. If I am too much, go find less. Now, I break this down in last week's episode where I explored all about too muchness. I'll add this to the show notes for you if you want to go tune into that episode. But this idea, if I am too much, go find less, is based on a lot of assumptions, right? It's based on an assumption that the other person finds us too much. And so that needs to be slowed down and explored. Did the other person actually communicate that they find us too much, or do we assume based on their behavior? Those are two different things. If they are telling us, listen, you are too much for me right now, that's one thing. If you are assuming based on certain information, certain behavior, even if you have been right in the past that those behaviors mean that that person is thinking that you are too much, you don't actually know if they are thinking that you are too much. A behavior may not necessarily be a concrete belief about who you are. We have to slow that down. We have to ask questions. So, for example, you're on the phone call with your best friend. Your best friend suddenly cuts you off and says, you know what, I can't right now. I gotta go. They hang up the phone. You now interpret that behavior as, oh my gosh, they think I'm too much. I'm too much for them. Because in the past, that's typically what that has meant. Now you ignore them. You cut them off because if I am too much for them, then they're not good enough for me. In the meantime, our friend just got a text message that her brother is in the hospital, and she just couldn't even wrap her mind around that text message, let alone communicate that to you, let alone talk about it with you. She just had to go. She had to tend to whatever that text message was and ultimately tend to the brother. You don't know any of that though. All you know is that you think that she's communicating to you that you are too much, when actually it had very little to do with you at all. This is our assumptions. Assumptions can be wrong. Sometimes they can be right. And when they're right, we usually call those gut instincts, right? I knew it. My gut was telling me. But when we're wrong, Whew. Now we have to really reorient ourselves around the fact that maybe our assumptions of other people are wrong. And many, many times they are wrong. And ultimately, we can never know until we ask. So maybe we text our friend and we say, hey, are you okay? We hung up the phone rather abruptly and I'm feeling a lot of feelings about it. Maybe you don't even ask if you're okay. Maybe you check in. Hey, I'm checking in with you. I feel like a little off after we hung up the phone. And then maybe your friend can say, I got some news. I'll respond to you later. Or maybe they will say, yeah, you are too much. That's usually not how people communicate. And yet we're so terrified that we are. We're so terrified that we are too much, that we want to make sure that we are projecting that fear onto everybody and finding confirmation of that fear so that we can continue to feel invalidated, that we continue to feel like we are too much, and we continue to feel like we are a problem and we need to be fixed. All of this will get addressed in Worthy Women Rise, because this entire way of relating is very narrow and constrictive, and it perpetuates a dynamic that really, really devalues the complexity of relationships. There's a totally different way that we can be living our lives, and continually assessing for whether or not we're too much for people is just exhausting. It is absolutely exhausting and not regenerative, not the way we really want to be relating to people. It's very transactional, isn't it? Maybe there are relationships that find you too much, and then we have to recalibrate. Maybe it doesn't mean that we cut them off. Maybe we just no longer go to them for certain things, right? Where we can't discern if we're so defended against whether or not people find us too much. And if people do, we suddenly cut them off. I mean, again, that's viewing relationships as very transactionally, and we're depriving ourselves of the flexibility of understanding where people are at. People are in different places in their lives. We can't just demand everybody to meet us exactly where we want them, or we cut them off, or else we're going to find ourselves truly alone, because relationships just don't work that way. So this idea, if you are too much, go find less. I mean, gosh, it's just so watered down to almost no value. The only place that I would find value in this phrase is if you're continually relating to somebody again and again and again, and they're continually communicating to you that this isn't working. Well, you know, at a certain point, then maybe it is time to cut off a relationship. Of course it is. And of course, none of this is talking about abusive relationships. I mean, we all have to really discern this, right, in the context of our lives. But typically, this phrase, I think, misses a lot of nuance that's required in us for it to really understand relationships and understand ourselves in the context of relationships. So we just need to remove that phrase from the world. I'm not a big fan of it. And this idea of go find less is so punitive, right? It's like a way that we're punishing people for not meeting our expectations. We're telling them that they need to go find people who won't be as demanding, as difficult, as if that's even possible. We're all demanding and needy and difficult in our different ways. And it's not fair to punish other people because they may not have been able to meet us where we're at, right? People can still be good and worthy and worthy of respect, even if they have treated us in ways that hurt us, right? That's hard to grapple, but it is true. And it's true in the opposite too. There are ways where we tell people that they are too much. We turn away from people all the time because we can't handle it for whatever reason. It doesn't mean that we're worthy of any less respect, right? We're not disposable. People are not disposable. Okay. So we get that, right? Let's move into the next one. Here's a good one. It's not your job to accommodate other people's insecurities by making yourself small. Now we can see how this is connected to worthiness, because oftentimes the worthiness wound tells us that we have to be small, right? We have to not take up space. That's why in Worthy Women Rise, it's all about learning how to take up space. But how to take up space is an art form. And we're going to talk a little bit about in how I dissect this quote. Now, on the one hand, just reading this quote, I'm not going to dismiss it as quickly as I dismissed the other one. There's some real validity to this. The core of this quote is actually very heartening, right? We can't continue to make ourselves small because we're so afraid of making other people feel insecure. I think that's at the heart of this quote, right? People are going to feel insecure, and that's going to be, in a lot of ways, not in our control. We can just be who we are and make people feel insecure. That's not our, it's very, what am I trying to say? it's very hard for us to walk around our lives being constantly concerned that we're going to make other people feel insecure. This happens a lot with people-pleasing dynamics. And again, this is something that we address quite extensively in Worthy Womanize because we see this everywhere with people-pleasers. There's this real need to try to manage other people's feelings. And this comes from a childhood of having had to manage our caregivers' feelings. So it really comes out of a place of survival, a place of protectiveness, and it's how we've now learned how to navigate relationships. We really want to protect people from feeling insecure, from feeling like there's something wrong with them, for feeling any type of quote-unquote negative emotion. We don't want people to feel bad. We don't want people to feel guilty. We don't want people to feel shame. This is beautiful, honestly. I don't want that for people. Like, I want people to feel good. I want people to feel significant, etc. But in the core of people pleasing is because if they feel that way, they will turn away from us. So it's no longer like out of the goodness of our hearts that we don't want people to suffer. The feeling is if people suffer, if they feel any sort of which way, particularly towards us, if they feel that way towards us, then something bad is going to happen. They're going to reject us, turn away, punish us in some way. And this, again, is often rooted in what has happened, in what is true. So we want to be very careful and be very tender with ourselves when we notice that this is alive within us, because at one point it was how we survived. Now, as adults, it tends to get in our way because it goes beyond like feeling empathy or empathic towards people, and often then gets turned into making ourselves really small. It tends to look like less about, oh, I care about people's well-being. I don't want people to feel bad. I'm going to be very kind and courteous to them. It goes beyond that. It goes, I don't want people to feel bad. If people feel bad, they will reject me. I don't want people to reject me, so I'm going to now make myself super small and I'm going to conform. I'm not going to be difficult. I'm not going to brag. I'm not, I'm going to like be very, very small and timid and try to make as little impact as possible. I'm not going to be honest. I'm not going to, etc. Because if I can just be really small and accommodating, then people won't leave. Then they'll like us and they'll stick around. So I think the heart of this quote is speaking to this dynamic and how often this is, again, not a way of relating, and it's not a way of being. And this is really coming out of a deep sense of insecurity about ourselves. And we really want to tend to those insecurities. We need to heal the worthiness wound here, or else it's going to be really, really hard for us to let other people have the experiences that they're going to have. Because the point of the matter is we're ultimately going to affect other people in all sorts of ways, whether we even know it or not. People are going to feel insecure around us, whether we know it or not. People are going to experience something that may be difficult for them to experience, and it's just going to happen. It's a part of being human. We now get to find ways of relating to ourselves so that when it comes up in another person, we don't have to now collapse inside of us and be filled with shame that we did something wrong. This is where the healing lies, so that we can withstand someone else not feeling good about us and we don't turn away from ourselves or from them. This is what it means to be able to stay in the tension with another person. We may hurt another person. And can we stay in relationship? Can we stay engaged in the hurt? When they say, you hurt me, am I going to now turn away from them by defending it or saying that they did something wrong or bad, that it's their fault in some way? Or are we going to turn it against ourselves? I'm wrong. I'm bad. I did something problematic. Or can we stay in the tension of, I really hurt you and I feel terrible and this is how I feel about it and you feel hurt about it, and can we be in this together? This is relationshiping, right? This is about being in relationships together. It takes a tremendous amount of capacity and internal structures to be able to do this, which we'd work on together in Worthy Women Rise. Okay, so back to the quote. It's not your job to accommodate other people's insecurities by making yourself small. On the one hand, completely agree, right? Just shared all of the ways in which I completely agree with this. I think there's such a good heart to this quote. Here's my concern about this quote. My concern about this quote is that it may lead us to being permissive, to be rather callous about other people's insecurities. It misses a context of where are other people's insecurities coming from. Is it a friendship? Is somebody telling you that they feel really insecure about the fact that they're single? They feel it's been really difficult on them to be single. And they're really doubting themselves. They're really down in the dumps. You know, their last breakup was really difficult and they're having a really hard time being single. That is not the time, maybe, for you to then go on and on and on about how amazing and perfect your relationship is, how you would hate to be single, that being single sucks, right? But if you think about this quote, it's not your job to accommodate another person's insecurities by making yourself small. In that example, not bringing up how great your relationship is, in some way, one could argue, is about being small. In some way. It's about choosing not to share that. In some way. I mean, I guess if we were to do healing of our worthiness wound, we would be able to discern when it's time to share and when it's time not to share. And it's not a representation of our smallness or bigness. It's actually coming out of a spaciousness that we can choose, pick and choose when to share what, when we can be really conscientious about the other person's experience. It's not a reflection of smallness at all. There's no even part of this equation about being smallness. However, if we don't do that work and we read this quote, it may feel permissive to be really hurtful and insensitive to people's insecurities. And I know that that's not the intention of this quote, but I think sometimes we can interpret it that way. And so I just want us to be thoughtful of, well, sometimes if somebody is sharing an insecurity of theirs, maybe we can be a little accommodating. Maybe we can be a little bit thoughtful. You know, I think of accommodation as being able to take something in, being able to accommodate it in our mind, make space for it in our minds. Now, if it's a pathological accommodation, which is a beautiful article that I've read, psychoanalytic theory about pathological accommodation, we are replacing ourselves with the other person. We're so accommodating that we are losing ourselves in the process. That is a accommodation that's coming out of the worthiness wound. An accommodation that's coming out of a healing, out of a moral sense of wholeness, is that we can actually make space for people in our minds. We can accommodate them without collapsing into our own badness or into a complete erasure of self. That's what we're striving for. What we're striving for is to be able to accommodate other people's insecurities when it's relevant or when it's important, by taking the context without making ourselves small internally. Sometimes, the thing about healing the worthiness wound is that sometimes it's just not appropriate for us to take up space, right? Like sometimes we have to discern about when it's appropriate for us to take up space or not. Can we discern that without collapsing into our badness? That's the work of healing the worthiness wound. So on the whole, this is a great quote, but I just want us to be really thoughtful about whether or not we are now making it bad for us to be thoughtful about other people's insecurities, because that's not the answer either. We don't want to be brazen in the world, completely dismissing the ways in which we may be impacting and hurting people, right? There's a quote that I shared on my Instagram that I've shared for years now. It's like I don't know where this quote came from in my mind. I don't know if I read it, so I don't know where it came from. Like, it feels too good to be true for me to have been the one to have originated this idea. But it came to me, I wrote it, I've never found anyone else who has said it. But we cannot be good girls if we want to be free women, right? That's the quote. We cannot be good girls if we want to be free women. A free woman. Here, that's a quote that we need to dissect a little bit. So I'm going to use my own quotes. I'm turning this on me too, okay? Some of us may read this and think that the answer then to being free is to fuck being a good girl, right? Being a good girl is a problem. Now, the reason why I think this quote is so catchy is because this idea of the good girl has been ingrained in so many of us from a very early age. That to be good means to be meek, it means to be quiet, it means to be complacent, it means to be that pathological accommodator, to be a people pleaser. And the quote is trying to aim at that experience, that if we've been told that, there's no way that that goodness is going to take us into freedom. To be good in upholding systems of oppression, to be good and complacent and the yes girl is really never going to lead us into a type of collective freedom or individual freedom. And we can maybe get a sense of that, that we really need to rise against what this ingrained goodness is, this idea of being a good girl. We really have to go up against that, because we want to be able to go into our shadow selves as well, into the parts of us that are not good, We want to be able to grasp in the ways in which we don't have to be subservient to the man. We don't have to be subservient to the greater culture in order for us to be taken care of or safe or supported. And that actually our freedom lies in our capacity to rebel against these systems, that you're actually allowed to have a wide variety of internal and external traits. Okay, so that's the kind of heart of the quote. However, I think it can be misinterpreted to mean that we should not strive to be good and that there's something wrong with good. And that word is very delicate because, of course, when we're talking about worth, we're talking about a goodness. We're talking about being able to land in an internal goodness, that we are inherently good. And I think, well, to not be good is to be bad or disrespectful or hurtful or harmful. And that's not what I'm advocating for at all. That's not freedom either, right? We're talking about psychopathy, sociopathy, narcissism. We're talking about these kind of words to mean malicious intent, to mean wanting to harm other people. That's not going to lead us to freedom either. And I don't want people to read that quote and feel like it's permission for them to be rude or offensive or to not take other people's well-being into consideration. And I can understand that that quote can be interpreted that way, but that's not how I intend it. And also, it's something that we got to bust, a myth that we got to bust, right? This idea that the answer against the good girl narrative is to be bad, is to be harmful, is to be hurtful. That's not what is meant here by freedom. What is meant by freedom is our ability to, one, face the ways in which we have hurt, the ways we have hurt other people, shamed other people, without collapsing into badness. Because when we collapse into badness, we make it be all about ourselves, and we're no longer in the relationship with the other person. We hurt people. We do that. And when we hurt people and we collapse into a badness, that's not going to be supportive for the healing that's then required. So, we want to kind of really question the good girl trope, but the answer isn't to now kind of unequivocally hurt other people. And it's also to be able to tolerate when we hurt other people, as well as being able to hold into the ways that we can hurt other people. Right? Carl Jung calls it the shadow self, right? Or shadow work, Worthy Women Rise. At one point, I really named it as shadow work, and it still is. It's going into the places that have the capacity to hurt, and really tending to the parts of ourselves that we want to cut off, that we don't want to admit that we have, and being able to kind of integrate it and bring it back in the fold of our consciousness, of our awareness, so that it's not being acted out accidentally. Yes? Okay, so that's the third quote. Okay. Oh, here's another, the too much-ness. Gosh, there's a lot of these. Finally realized I wasn't asking for too much. I was just asking the wrong person. Again, the heart of the quote is actually quite brilliant, right? The heart of the quote is saying that your feelings of too muchness may not actually be a reflection of just because you feel like you are too much doesn't mean that you actually are too much. Sometimes it may be that you are too much, and that means maybe that there's something going on in the relationship that can be worth attending to. Again, I talk all about this in the previous episode. So the heart of this quote is inherently like if you are feeling like you're asking for too much, maybe you are asking the wrong person. Maybe there's somebody else out there that you can be navigating this need with. If you're continually finding in your intimate relationship that you're asking for things that feel like the bare minimum of a relationship, and the other person is just unequivocally denying and rejecting you. Let's say they disappear for hours at a time, days at a time, and that's an important value of yours in relationships, is to be able to be touching base, to kind of have an idea of where they are in the world, not maybe all the time, but just to be general touching base, to be kept in mind, to be related to be thought of. And they're not doing that, and you have conversations with them and they're telling you, no, I can't do that. Well, then maybe that's not the right person for you, or maybe it's something for the two of you to work through and navigate together. Are they willing to meet you? Are they willing to be like, okay, this is something I'm not very good at, but I'm willing to figure it out with you? Or are they saying, no, that's all on you. You're the problem. I'm never going to do that. Those are two different responses, and those are different pieces of information for you to decide how you then want to be in relationship with them, right? Okay, so Are you asking for too much? Potentially. Maybe you are. Maybe you are. Where is space for that in this quote? Because in this quote, it's putting all of the blame on the other person. And I think that's the core of a lot of these quotes, is that the blame is all on the other person, when what's important in terms of relationship skills is that there's you and the other person. Sometimes it's the other person, sometimes it's you. Where may you be asking too much? Where may you be too demanding on other people to do something for you? Where may you be demanding that everybody else change so you don't have to? Where are you placing all of your worth on other people's behavior so that you don't have to do the work of really internalizing your worth? Where may you be, right? Asking, demanding, putting everything on other people, because that is a real thing and it happens to all of us. It happens to all of us. One of the ways in which I see a lot of demands happening is for people to be mind readers. We unconsciously or consciously demand that other people read our minds, that they anticipate what we want, that they know what we want. And we hope that by them knowing and anticipating, we don't have to then do the work of asking. And there's many reasons for why we hope that mind reading will work in a relationship. But the problem is it never really does, because the other person isn't in your mind. Mind reading at one point in time was a really important way of relating. I'm talking babyhood. The mom, the caregiver, had to be able to read the baby's mind, had to be able to anticipate and guess what the baby wanted. The baby could cry. The mother kind of had to know what type of cry it was. All of this is a lot of mind reading, an accommodation that the mother had to do for the baby. If that was done properly, the baby begins to be able to put into words what they want. That's the goal. But for many of us who may not have gotten that, or may have not gotten that to the sufficient levels that we needed, or for a variety of other reasons, we now may grow up really wanting other people to read our minds and demanding that other people read our minds and then punishing them when they don't. This cycle, which can be deeply connected to the worthiness wound, is not going to set you up for successful partnership and successful relationships, because ultimately people can't read your mind. And at the end of the day, you are going to have to advocate for your needs. You can't just anticipate everyone else to advocate for your needs. Yes? So that's where I kind of sometimes have issues with some of these quotes, is that there may be times when you actually may be demanding something that isn't possible in relationships, or not possible in that relationship. Context matters. There's also a similar quote of like, you're not too needy, you have needs. Now, I think I've even said things to this extent, because I think when we come from a place where any need we have feels too needy, when we start asking for our needs to be met, we may feel like we are needy, because we become so accustomed to not having any needs that, of course, when we're practicing needs, may feel like we are too needy. And that's just something that we have to learn how to tolerate and sit with, and expand our capacity to be with the ways in which we are allowed to have needs. And maybe eventually that feeling of neediness starts to get smaller. However, what misses in that quote, and something for us to think about, and something that can be hard to grapple with without collapsing into ourselves, right? This is why it can be so hard for us to accept any type of feedback from people without collapsing into ourselves. Because when we don't have a strong ego structure, a way to hold ourselves in our goodness internally, any feedback may bring us into a sense of badness. This is the work of healing the worthiness wound, and it is what we do in Worthy Women Rise. There may be times when you may be actually too needy. And that's not a reflection of your badness. It may be a reflection of the relationship. But there may be times when you are too much, too demanding, too needy, too bossy. This is true. This is true. It just is not possible that you're never too needy. You may actually be. And that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing. It doesn't make you bad or wrong. It just means that there's some information here that's happening in the relationship that's worth examining and thinking about. And this is where doing this work ourselves can really mess us up. When we do this work ourselves, the worthiness wound work, we read the books, we're journaling or whatever, we only have one side of the equation. It can be hard to not know what we don't know. This is why, the metaphor of like, you don't expect a surgeon to do surgery on themselves, right? Top surgeons don't do surgery. The best surgeons in the world don't do surgeries on themselves. It's literally impossible to be kind of more rational and logical and think about ourselves when we're in pain, right? And not only that, the angle can be off. It's just not advisable to do surgery on yourself. In the same way, when it comes to healing, we often don't have an accurate perception of ourselves. We often don't know where we are too much or where we're not too much enough, right? We tend to not have an accurate perception of our goodness. We tend to not have an accurate perception, if we're grappling with the worthiness wound, of where the worthiness wound may appear in relationships. We just may not, because we have a hard time seeing ourselves accurately. And this is why healing in isolation doesn't often work. We can get caught up in our own stuff. We may miss out on where, we're actually not needy at all, but we're just expecting the bare minimum from people. Or actually in that case, maybe I was too needy. I was wanting to fulfill something that they couldn't fulfill because I want my partner to give me the love that my parents never gave me. And now there's something to mourn. Now there's something to grieve there. And maybe we don't know that unless somebody else is gently helping us see it. That's what I get to do in my one-on-one work, and that's what we get to do in Worthy Women Rise together. You're not expected to know all of this and discern the details of these myths within the context of your own lives by yourself. Like, you know that, right? We're relational beings. We need each other. We learn about ourselves through relationships. We cannot do this in isolation. We never could, and we will never be able to. I don't care how many stories you hear about the people in the monks in the caves. It's just not the way our society and our social structure works. We need each other, and we learn best from each other. That's why I put Worthy Women Rise as a group experience, because all of our feelings about groups is going to come up in Worthy Women Rise. At least now we get to put light into it. We get to name it. We get to be in it together and tend to these spaces together. That creates something really radical, a really important type of change. Okay. So all of these myths they're not necessarily myths. They're just they're quotes that may have a little bit lack of nuance. I'm trying to add some nuance into it. I hope that this is all useful for all of you. Okay, here's a big myth. When you feel worthy, you will never feel inadequate or too much again, right? So worthiness is a destination, according to this quote. And this is something that I disagree with very, very deeply. Because it's the healing of the worthiness wound is not about never feeling inadequate or never feeling too much. Healing and tending to the worthiness wound is about changing our relationship to the wound, not about eradicating the wound. Certainly in the ways in which our culture is structured, I just don't imagine that there's a way in which we can never feel inadequate because of capitalism, because of systems of oppression. I mean, just the world that we live in. We're going to be constantly reminded the ways in which we're not enough. Right? That's just kind of the way it is. However, we can develop a relationship with our worthiness wound that allows when inadequacy comes up, it allows us to understand it as information, as something for us to understand about ourselves, the relationship, what we're believing, what we're understanding, and for us to communicate it or navigate it or think about it. It's information. It's not a reflection of truth. When we feel unworthy, it doesn't necessarily mean that we are, but it certainly means that we're understanding something to mean that we are. And the more that we can tend to inhale the worthiness wound and change our relationship to the wound, the more that we can create a capacity to then understand the information without collapsing into badness. So there's a lot of misinformation out there about worthiness, and people really promise a lot. They promise tools and skills that you will then leave the experience feeling worthy. I have yet to see that to be true. Even in Worthy Women Rise, I don't promise that in Worthy Women Rise. In fact, it's something that we grapple with together as a group. I don't promise that you're never going to feel unworthy again. I can't promise that. And I also can't promise that you're going to leave the program feeling worthy and now suddenly all of your dreams will come true. No. That's not how this works. That's not what this looks like. And anyone who sells you that is lying. They're a liar, and you want to be really careful. It may sound really good, and they may make it look so seductive with their lifestyle and their beautiful language and words, but I promise you, and this is someone who has done this work for so long, there's no quick fixes to this. And there's no such thing as a destination where you'll get there and then you will feel worthy, you will feel happy, and nothing bad will ever happen to you again. Now, what I do offer in Worthy Women Rise are tools and ways of thinking about ourselves and the world that will help us way beyond the program to internalize our worth. What I do offer in Worthy Women Rise is an experience of worthiness that you'll be able to take in and take out into the world, so that when you feel inadequate and when you feel too much, you will be able to at least have some ideas of how to relate to it differently. I know that may not seem so seductive and sexy, but I promise you it is life-changing. Okay? So this idea that when you're worthy, you're going to feel perfect, you're going to feel blah, 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 it's a lie. Don't believe the lies. Okay. Another one about too muchness. You will never be too much for the right people, or you will be too much for some people. Those aren't your people. That's a bummer, right? Again, that's a bummer, because now we're putting it all on the other person. We're saying that the right people will never make us feel a certain way. That's like saying the right people will never make you feel stupid, or the right people will never make you feel bad, or the right people will never make you feel, insert that with anything, and that's just not true, because feelings are relational. Are they making you feel this way, or are you feeling this way because of something that they said that has nothing actually to do with them and everything about the way you've internalized it, right? Somebody can say to you, you can say, hey, look, those are polar bears. And they're like, I think those are penguins. And now suddenly you feel stupid. Are they making you feel stupid, or are you feeling stupid because of your own internal landscape? Right? Now, of course, if somebody is name calling you or telling you you're stupid, you're an idiot, that's different. That's different. But a lot of times this idea of you will never feel a certain way if you're with the right people is a lie, because the point is we're going to feel all sorts of ways in our relationships, but if we can develop relational skills to be able to navigate it and talk about it, that is a huge, huge thing. This is really at the crux of a lot of what we do in Worthy Women Rise and in my one-on-one work, is this idea of like, oh, I should never feel this way in therapy, right? Like I should never feel misunderstood in therapy. I literally am in this relationship with this therapist because they're going to understand me. But the point is, of course you're going to feel misunderstood. Of course you're going to feel hurt. Of course you are. This is a relationship and I'm a human, right? But it's not about not feeling these ways, but about being able to talk about it and work through it and figure it out and be in it together in ways that maybe you've never been able to figure it out and be in it together with another person. That makes all the difference, okay? So this idea you'll never be too much for the right people, no, I don't like that at all. I don't like that at all. You will, of course, experience the full complexity of the human experience with any meaningful relationship. The closer the relationship is, the more it is. Now, to what extent? That's important for you to think about, right? If you're always feeling a certain way in a relationship, that's something for you to think about and consider. And again, I'm not talking about abuse. I'm not talking about like more overt and obvious signs that the relationship isn't right for you. I'm talking about the more subtle ways in which we relate to people. Okay. Ooh, how about this one? I don't care about what other people think about me. I know my worth, and that is all that matters. Okay, so in this quote, what we're essentially doing is we're using our worth as a shield. I know my worth, like I'm holding the shield, right? I know my worth. Nothing you do can affect me. Now, this is like really seductive. This is really seductive. This idea, especially for those of us who consider ourselves highly sensitive, we're kind of always feeling like we feel too much, we're empathic, we're, the highly sensitive folks, we're the feelers, okay? This is seductive for us feelers, this idea of like, I won't care what other people think about me when I can recognize my work. Other people won't affect me as much. This is all really, really seductive thinking, because it can be really painful to be the feelers of the world. So this idea of like, I don't care what people think about me is kind of very pervasive on the internet as a result of the healing work, right? Like when you heal, when you do the things, you're going to stop caring what people think about you. Can you guess? Can you guess my perspective on this? The point of the healing work isn't to not care. I mean, gosh, what are we trying to do here? If we don't care about what other people think about us, then we're really cutting ourselves off from the ability to be thoughtful, right? Like, I don't care. The idea of I don't care is really a way in which we're cutting off relationships. We're cutting off care. How is healing to cut off care? We want to care. We want to do good for each other. We're trying to build a beautiful world for each other. I don't care? Yikes. That's not it. The answer isn't to care less. When we tend to and heal the worthiness wound, it's not that we stop caring. It's that we're able to place the value of that care in the context of the value of our care. So it's not, I don't care about what people think about me. It's, I care. I care about other people. I care about their thoughts. And I care about myself. And I care about my thoughts. And now I'm going to balance that out of what I want to do. Let's say you want to start a YouTube channel. Obviously, I just started, I didn't just start, I've had this YouTube channel for a long time, but I just started doing videos of my podcast again. So this is fresh on my mind. Okay. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, what are people going to think? I mean, what are people going to think? I mean, my, videos right now get maybe 100 views, maybe not even. Are people going to think that that means I'm not reputable? Are people going to now think that, what I have to say isn't of value? Is it embarrassing? It's embarrassing to only get like 100 views on YouTube, right? What are people going to think about me? I shouldn't do it. I shouldn't do it because what people are going to think about me it's really, really weighing on me. Now, if you were sitting in front of me in Worthy Women Rise or in our one-on-one work and you said that to me, we could examine it in various different ways. We could think about it in terms of like, are you putting onto other people something that you're doubting within yourself, right? Classic projection. Like maybe I'm embarrassed. I'm worried I'm going to fail. I'm scared of what these numbers mean about me. I've internalized it and I'm putting it onto other people because it's safer to imagine what they will think about me than to actually be with the fact that this is what I think about myself, right? Is that what's happening here? Or do you have a very strong kind of inner critic, a super ego internalized by a critical parent that told you that this, there's all sorts of ways that we can work with this. But at the end of the day, it's not about, I don't care about the numbers. I don't care. The answer isn't to go to the pendulum swing of like, I don't care. Oftentimes when I hear somebody say, I don't care what they think, or I don't, the work is to not care. I feel it's like a defense. It's a way that we defend against the fact that we actually care a whole lot. And it's so overwhelming that we want to kind of cut those feelings away. But cutting our feelings away, cutting off the bad feelings also means we're cutting off the good too. We can't just cut and not have consequences to it. So it's not about not caring. It's about being able to care, be thoughtful about it. I do care. I want people to like my work. I work with people and I want people to be proud of me and I want people to be happy for me. And I also want to be proud of myself. And I also want to be happy for myself. And I want to do brave, difficult things because I think it's important for me to continue to rub up against what I think is possible for myself. Now, when I weigh that, I'm going to start that YouTube channel. And if I don't get the likes that I want, I'm going to be with that disappointment. Disappointment won't kill me. I'm going to think about it. Maybe it means I have to increase my marketing around it. Maybe I just let it be that number for what it is, while it is what it is, trust that it will grow or trust that whoever is watching it is going to get what they want to get out of it, right? Suddenly things feel a little more different because it's not about not caring. It's about taking that care and taking the care that we have for ourselves and making sense of it together. I don't ever want to live in a world where I don't care about what people think. I want to live in a world where people's thoughts about me aren't so persecutory, where I'm not imagining that everybody is out to get me, right? If I'm really imagining that everyone is out to get me, that everyone has thoughts of persecution against me, now we're talking about something that needs to be really tended to, because odds are people aren't even noticing that closely what you're doing. People are living in their own world. There's so many times in Worthy Women Rise where a participant will say I'm worried that all of you are judging me. And then we go around, I'm like, okay, well, let's see, what are people thinking? And everyone else is thinking I was just worried about what I was going to say next. Or I was actually actually thinking that you were really brave and I was feeling like I'm not as brave as you, right? Like people just aren't judging us as much as we think that they are. It's just kind of true. And where you think that everyone is judging you super hard in ways that you don't judge yourself, take a note if maybe that's projection. Maybe you are imagining everybody else is judging you, or you're allowing other people to judge you very harshly in a way that you're able to disown the ways in which you're judging yourself. So all of this, this whole idea of not caring, it's really about being able to place proper weight. People in your inner circle, you may care more about what they think, right? Like I care deeply about what my husband thinks about me. I care deeply and I want him to be proud, and I will work with him and where I feel like maybe he's not proud of me. But I care less about what a stranger on the internet thinks about my work, right? So like people in inner circle, I care a lot more. And then as the circle goes out, people that I don't know, I'm gonna care less. Maybe it's not that I'm not going to care, but I'm going to care a little less. I'm gonna put a little less weight onto it. But if there's millions of people out in the world telling me something, maybe there's some information there, right? Maybe, not always, maybe. Yes? Okay. Getting to a place where you are feeling more spacious with your worth, not feeling so paralyzed by the worthiness wound. That internal experience isn't connected to not caring about what people think. They're two different things. We can't use our worth as a shield. If you're using anything as a shield, it's a defense. Now, there's nothing wrong with defenses, and certain defenses can be really useful for certain periods of time, etc., but that's not how healing the worthiness wound looks like. It's not a shield. Oh, I know my worth. Nothing can penetrate. That's not right. That's not it, right? That's not what healing the worthiness wound looks like. Healing the worthiness wound is being able to create that internal structure that can hold and support us regardless of what's happening out there. It's being porous enough to take in without getting overwhelmed by the outer world. Yes? Okay. Gosh, I have so many of these. I'm like noticing the time. I have so many of these. This idea of charging your worth, bullshit. Your worth and your value are not connected to money. Period. Don't listen to anyone who says charge your worth, right? For us entrepreneurs, your worth has nothing to do with it. And in fact, in my mentorship, we often work very hard to detangle between our worth and goodness as who we are and our business and the response that our business gets, because they're two different things. And while they're intricately tied together, like charging your worth, well, we're going to continue to ride a very, very complicated roller coaster where you get good results, you feel good about yourself. You get bad results, you feel bad about yourself. And that is exhausting. Your business is not a reflection of your worth. Your price is not a reflection of your worth. I know plenty of people who do wonderful work and they charge less. I know people who do really shitty work and they charge a shit ton. I mean, there's just no connection. No connection. Charging a worth means nothing. To me, it just screams capitalism. Like, that is not how we want to be thinking about our prices. That's not how we want to be thinking about our income. There is no connection. Because if we're connected, then we're saying that Elon Musk he's a more worthy individual than, gosh, someone working in a fast food restaurant. And is that really the way we're seeing things? I mean, yes, in our culture, that is 100% the way we see things. We see class, we see money as a value, a reflection of someone's value. Yes, I know that. But I don't want to be perpetuating that. And so I want to be thoughtful about how I price things, how I think about money, how I think about my business, so it's not tangled up in my worth. Yes, charge your worth, toss it out. Toss it out. No. That's not the way to be thinking about your income in terms of your job. There's other ways that we can think about it that goes beyond. I'm just noticing the time. So we're going to not go deeper into that. There are other ways that we can think about how we want to see money. Not connected to worth. Okay. A couple other ones. This idea that feeling worthy is a choice. This is very prevalent in the coaching industry. A lot of things are choices in the coaching industry. And to think of our worthiness as a choice. So if you're feeling inadequate to much-ness, you're making a choice to believe that. You can choose to believe otherwise. On the one hand, we do have a lot more choice than we think we do. And it can be sometimes helpful for us to think about it as a choice. Sometimes it can be really, really useful. We don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. A hammer can be very useful at times and can be the best tool for what we need. But if we use a hammer for everything, well, then we're missing out on the nuance of the worthiness wound, and that it's not always a choice. It's like saying our feelings are a choice. Now we have to break down like how the brain works. There's a very strong school of thought, the mindset crowd, the cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT crowd. There's this huge kind of prevalence of this idea that it's our thoughts that create our feelings. And if we change our thoughts, we change our feelings. But it's actually not grounded in human psychology, where sometimes that works, but oftentimes our feelings actually come first. And if we're working more somatically or relationally or psychoanalytically, then we actually see it quite often, how the feelings tend to come first, and then the thoughts come to support the feelings. So it's less about feeling it as a choice and more about understanding why we're thinking, why we're feeling what we're feeling, and what information there is. And that, again, is a whole different orientation to how we understand ourselves in the world. The problem with viewing worthiness as a choice, something you just choose, is that it really denies the ways in which it is baked into our kind of relational blueprint. It really diminishes the extent to which the worthiness wound can really destabilize and disorient us. And it trivializes it to the point that when then you can't seem to make that choice, it means that there's something wrong or broken within you. And this is where I came into trying to understand the worthiness wound, right? Like, I came from a background where I was very, very, drank the Kool-Aid of the mindset crowd and really believed that my problem was my mindset. And if I just had positive thinking, I would have a positive life. And yet none of that was touching on this feeling of inadequacy or too muchness. And I then perpetuated a sense of being broken. Why is it that all these ways of thinking is helping everybody else, but I'm still stuck? I'm not feeling good enough, no matter how much I'm saying I choose to feel good enough. And so it took, everything that I now teach in Worthy Women Rise for me to really get to the point that it's not necessarily a choice. Sometimes it is. Sometimes the choice is to not listen to it. Sometimes the choice is to acknowledge it in the moment, but then kind of tuck it away for later. These can definitely be choices that we can make. But ultimately, healing the worthiness wound and trivializing it to just making it be about a choice of our worth really devalues the extent to which this space within us disorients us completely. It's just, like I said, a hammer can be really useful, but it can't be the only tool in our toolbox. Or else everything that we use is going to be a nail, right? And then we're, again, continuing to feed this idea that we're broken, there's something wrong with us, when really we're just using the wrong tools. Okay, so it's not that feeling worthy is a choice. There are choices that can be made, choices to heal, choices to put ourselves in spaces where we can find healing. There are so many choices. And again, I think we tend to underestimate how many choices we have. However, feeling worthy, while it is innate within us and while we can do things that can support our worth, when we're feeling unworthy, thinking about it as a choice can feel really bad. There's other ways that we can tend to the worthiness wound in those moments that are more effective. Okay, I think we're good. Let's wrap it up here. I think I did a lot of myths. I can't wait to hear from all of you what you think. If there's any other myths that you would like debunked or any other quotes that you feel like lack nuance. I'm really glad that I brought in my quote because, again, the point here isn't to devalue other people who are saying these things, but it's just that, well, the internet can lose a lot of nuance, and we need nuance if we're to think about ourselves and this work in a more critical, holistic way. So thanks for being here with me today. If you are interested in learning more about Worthy Women Rise, you can go to worthywomenrise.com. I am loving this worthiness season. I'm loving hearing from all of you about the value of worthiness season and all of the ways in which you've taken everything I've shared and like really embodied it in your life. I'm just so proud of you for being here, for listening into this, for being a part of this movement towards worth. You know, I truly believe that if we want to heal, it is possible for us. And I'm just celebrating and cheering you on as you do what you can to tend to yourself in a better way. This is really, really incredible to be a part of. So thank you so much for being here, and I'll catch you next week.